House Republicans have complained for weeks about Democrats interviewing key witnesses in the impeachment probe behind closed doors. Well, now that public hearings are about to start, the GOP is still complaining. Let's bring in Congressman Sean Patrick Maloney of New York, a Democrat on the Intelligence Committee. Congressman, as I discussed with Congressman Hurd, Republicans have now put out their written list of witnesses. It includes Hunter Biden, the unnamed whistleblower, and Nellie Ohr, who folks may remember. She worked for Fusion GPS, which sought information from sources in Ukraine in 2016 and put up the Steele dossier. Will Democrats agree to call any of these witnesses? And if you don't, what does that say about the fairness of this entire proceeding?
Well, I can't speak for the chairman, but what I can tell you is that I think we will end up calling some of the witnesses on that list. And here's my test. My test is, do these witnesses have important information, knowledge, or evidence about the president's conduct? And if it passes that test, then we should call them, sure.
So let's ask specifically Hunter Biden, Nellie Ohr, the unnamed whistleblower. Do any of them pass that test and therefore should be called?
The first two, no. The third one, you just heard Congressman Hurd give a very eloquent explanation of why we don't force the revelation of a whistleblower's identity. So no in all three cases, but for different reasons.
Well, I mean, let's focus on Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden is at the center of this. There are allegations of corruption. There certainly are questions why a fellow named Hunter Biden would get a big job in Ukraine when his father was then the vice president and conducting relations with Ukraine. Isn't that a fair person to talk to?
Well, let me ask you, Mr. Wallace, what information Mr. Biden, Hunter Biden, a private citizen who has broke no laws by serving on a board of directors, would have about the president's withholding of military aid to Ukraine? In other words, he has no knowledge of what the president did or didn't do here that is the subject of the impeachment inquiry. There are certainly questions, of course, and many people have asked them, but it's not relevant to this week's hearing.
So, I don't have the list right in front of me, but you obviously saw it. You're a member of the committee. Which member of the Republican potential witness would you agree to call?
Again, there are witnesses on the Republican list who have been interviewed in depositions already. And, of course, those transcripts are going to be released fully. And so I would expect the witnesses who have been interviewed because they have material information would be likely called in public. But again,
for instance,
those are not...
Kurt Volker, who was a special emissary to Ukraine.
Mr. Volker testified for the committee. So did Mr. Morrison. Those witnesses are on the list. Mr. Hale is similarly a witness who's been interviewed, who's on the list. Those are the witnesses I have in mind. But again, this is not my decision. I can't speak for the chairman. But those witnesses do have material information about the president's conduct in this case. That's the proper focus of this inquiry. And if I can just say, Chris, I hope your viewers will keep an open mind. This is Veterans Day weekend. God bless all who serve and who wear the country's uniform, as my dad did, as my grandfather did. These are also military veterans. Ambassador Taylor was an infantry officer with the 101st Airborne Division in Vietnam, served in combat.
Right.
West Point graduate. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman earned the Purple Heart in Iraq. These are veterans and credible witnesses. I hope people will keep an open mind and hear their testimony unfiltered and read the transcripts by all means. They're all coming out in public.
All right, let's talk about another apparently non-witness at this point, and that is National Security Advisor, former National Security Advisor John Bolton. Here is what his lawyer wrote this week to the committee. Bolton was involved, according to his lawyer, in many relevant meetings and conversations that have not yet been discussed in the testimonies thus far. Continuing the quote, if the House chooses not to pursue through subpoena the testimony of Ambassador Bolton, let the record be clear that is the House's decision. Congressman, isn't John Bolton perhaps the best witness, other than the president, as to what was going on inside the Oval Office? And why on earth wouldn't you wait to see what he has to say?
We have invited Ambassador Bolton to appear, and that sounds like a nervous lawyer to me, because they are refusing to honor a legal request to provide relevant testimony.
Well, wait,
Ambassador, excuse me.
No, well, forgive me, sir.
Excuse me.
No, wait a minute. Well, sir, let me just wait a minute. So, but the point is that he has gone to a judge and said, You tell us. I've got an order from the White House. I've got an order from Congress. You tell me what to do.
Right, Mr. Wallace, that's not how it works. You show up and respond to a subpoena, or you go to a judge and get it quashed, or you show up and you invoke a legitimate privilege and refuse to answer a particular question. It is unprecedented to say, you, Congress, go to a judge and tell me to appear. That's not how it works, and Ambassador Bolton is a better lawyer than that. He knows that personally.
That isn't what they're doing. They're not saying Congress go to the judge. They are going to the judge. That's what they did with Charles Cooperman, another one of the clients who was an assistant to a deputy to Bolton. And Bolton, they are going to the judge, and they're saying, Judge, we've got these competing claims. You tell us what to do. They're not asking the House to do anything.
Mr. Wallace, I agree with you that he has important information, and we would love to hear from Ambassador Bolton. I think the public deserves to hear from Ambassador Bolton, who, remember, called this a drug deal and wanted nothing to do with it, who instructed his subordinates to report these conversations to the lawyers at the White House because he knew they were improper. Ambassador Bolton does have important information. I don't understand why the White House has instructed him not to cooperate. You should ask them.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is this is an impeachment. This isn't just oversight. This is the potential impeachment of the President of the United States. There is going to be a court hearing in early December that Charles Cooperman, the deputy to Bolton, and Bolton now would be part of that suit. Why not wait? We're talking about a month. Exactly a month to find out what a judge says. Why wouldn't, when you're talking about the impeachment of the president, why wouldn't the House Intelligence Committee be willing to wait to find out such key evidence?
Again, we would love to have Mr. Bolton's evidence. There's nothing preventing him from giving it. But remember, oh, and by the way, any notion that that's going to be favorable to the president, I think is debunked by everything in the public domain already. Ambassador Bolton called this a drug deal. I'm not sure the president will want to hear from Ambassador Bolton, but we sure do. But here's the point. The point is do we have sufficient evidence from credible witnesses that we're going to present in public testimony to move forward with an inquiry which may result in a referral to the Senate where there will be a trial, where witnesses like Ambassador Bolton will have an opportunity, again, to provide the information they know. I encourage him to do it now. I encourage him to do it then. And I don't think it will be favorable to the president. It is Ambassador Bolton who saw clearly how abusive and inappropriate the president's conduct was.
You know, he's not going to be testified because you guys have a timetable that you want to get this done by the end of the year. Let me ask you a couple of questions to finish this up. President Trump now says that he is going to release the transcript of a phone call, not the July 25th phone call that we've already seen, but an earlier phone call in April, just after Zelensky was inaugurated between the two presidents. What value does that transcript have for your committee and your investigation?
Well, I don't know of any evidence that would be relevant from the first phone call, except that it was a routine phone call to congratulate the president. If the president wants to release it, that's fine. I don't think it's relevant to this investigation.
Let's turn to the public hearings this week. You've got 3 witnesses testifying. We've already seen the transcripts of their interviews. People know what they're going to say. Is the argument that you're basically people aren't going to read the book, but they're going to see the movie? Because that didn't work out very well in the Robert Mueller testimony.
Well, Mr. Wallace, the point is that the Republicans have been demanding for weeks that the public be able to see this testimony. You know, they should take yes for an answer. I think it's very important that the public be able to judge for itself, and I really encourage your viewers to just watch the hearings, read the transcripts, or watch it live, and make up your own minds. You won't have any filter. You won't have the press or politicians in the way. You'll have witnesses giving opening statements. And these are military veterans. These are career, nonpartisan civil servants. The first witness, Ambassador Bill Taylor, is an appointee of a Republican president who served his country in the military.
You've already made that point, and I would like to get I'm running out of time. I'd like to get one last question in, if I might. Here's what President Trump says about all these witnesses. Take a look.
The testimony has all been fine. I mean, for the most part, I never even heard of these people. I have no idea who they are. It seems that nobody has any first-hand knowledge. There is no first-hand knowledge.
The president does have a point. None of these officials actually talked to the president. When we think back to John Dean with Richard Nixon, he took us into the Oval Office. He told what he told the president and what the president told him. As the president says, all of the information we're going to hear this week is secondhand. Is that enough to impeach a president?
Well, Mr. Wallace, if you're talking about this week, but of course there are witnesses like Ambassador Sondland, who spoke directly to the president. There are other witnesses who have refused to cooperate. By the way, the State Department has refused to produce all the notes and corroborating evidence. But there are absolutely direct witnesses to the president's phone call. Lieutenant Colonel Vindman was on the call and went immediately to the NSC legal department because he knew it was wrong, what he heard. That's a military veteran. There are a lot of people with direct knowledge, and it's, honestly, if I can say, it is heartbreaking to hear the president, any American president, deride an important process where reliable witnesses are giving information. It's also heartbreaking to realize, once you see this evidence, that any American president would engage in this conduct. You know, it gives me no pleasure to tell you the American president has abused his office, and he should be accountable.
Well, as you say, people are going to get to see for themselves this week. Congressman Maloney, thank you. Thanks for joining us. And, of course, Fox News will cover the hearings this week live.
Thank you.